So as I noted at the top, today is September 11th, the 24th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. And in general, I find the obligation to commemorate this day, to walk through all the events of it, to be kind of dreary and even a little bit exploitative. But I do think it's notable that today is September 11th, because when I do talk about September 11th, as I do sometimes, not just necessarily on the anniversary, the thing I try to focus on, what I think is most important, are the lessons that I hope we have learned, not just from September 11th, but from our reaction to them, our collective reaction as a country, as a world. And the 9/11 attack was truly cataclysmic, truly traumatic, and engendered a lot of very deeply held rage and anger. And I know that because I lived in Manhattan on September 11th. I was there on September 11th. I shared all the same emotions everybody else did. Rage and deep sadness and a desire for vengeance. I actually remember, I was thinking about this morning, that 6 days after 9/11, I think on a Sunday, I went to see a movie, just to try and get my mind off of what was happening. And at some point in the movie, I had paid attention to the movie for like 5 minutes, and then suddenly I stepped back and I realized, wow, that's the first time I was able to not think about September 11th since 6 days ago, when it happened. Everywhere you walked, you saw and smelled the rubble. You saw desperate signs from family members with pictures of their loved ones, hoping beyond hope that they weren't dead, but in some hospital, or amnesia, it would say lost. And of course, you knew that they were actually dead under the rubble. All those same emotions. And a lot of people at some point got control of those emotions, understood that while valid, they could override your reason, and slowly started realizing, the country did, that our political leaders were exploiting the emotions around 9/11 to induce us to acquiesce to a whole variety of authoritarian assaults on our basic rights and liberties that would previously have been unthinkable. Obviously, to justify invasions and wars and lengthy bombing campaigns and warrantless eavesdropping and other forms of surveillance and detention that were completely un-American. And gradually, year after year, and polls show now that a large majority of Americans see this, people reached the point where they concluded that they should probably not have that happen again. That in future incidents where something terrible happens, where violence is brought to us, the rage and anger that we're feeling can be righteous, it can be valid. I talked last night about my own emotions from having seen the Charlie Kirk video. I knew Charlie some. I wasn't a close friend of his by any means, but I did know him. But I think the more important effect was watching, as I said last night, a 31-year-old father and husband and son and friend who has never started a war, never implemented violence, never attacked anybody. He went around the country defending his ideas, encouraging people who disagreed to debate with him. And regardless of what one thought of his ideas, that was the extent of what he did. And then you just watch him sitting in a college campus in a chair, engaging with people who disagreed with him, inviting them to come up and engage with him, and suddenly you see a bullet enter his neck and his life ends. And of course, I think any decent person should feel at least some emotions from seeing that. I'm not saying everybody has to stop and mourn and grieve the way everybody else does. And you can criticize Charlie Kirk. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I don't believe in whitewashing somebody's record, but the idea of celebrating it or justifying it is horrific for the reasons I laid out last night. But I also understand that there are a lot of emotions. The problem is, within those emotions comes the opportunity for people to exploit those emotions to usher in a whole wide range of repressive and authoritarian measures, like we've seen after 9/11 and every other crisis that we go through. It's just a repeated pattern. And we're starting to see that. Here was President Trump last night, giving a 4-minute address or so from the Oval Office, and part of it, what I thought was a very nice tribute to Charlie Kirk and condolences and to his family and lamenting his death. But other parts seem designed to lay the framework to take official government measures to repress an entire political movement or an ideology that he blames somehow for having led to the violence that ended Charlie Kirk's life. Here's part of what he said.
It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today.
All right, now, let me just say, that theory that if you say enough demonizing things about your political opponents, you become responsible for any violence carried out against them or in the name of your cause, is exactly what the liberal left has embraced as a theory over the past 30 years, in the, not just in the United States, but the broader West, to justify censorship. Go talk to any of them, and they'll tell you exactly this. They'll say, look, we're not censoring people's political views, but if somebody's going to demonize trans people and gin up hatred against them, they're going to be responsible for inciting violence against them. Or if somebody is speaking disparagingly about immigrants or Latinos or black people, we have to ban that because that's an ideology that demonizes people and leads to their endangerment. That's exactly the theory that has been propounded on campuses to justify all kinds of hate speech restrictions. It's the same theory, by the way, that Trump has used to demand greater hate speech restrictions in the name of protecting Jews from anti-Semitism. If you criticize Israel, if you protest Israel, if you say these sorts of things that I deem anti-Semitic, it means you're going to spawn anti-Semitism and put things in danger. Not only is this the theory used by every censor in history, regardless of what ideology they are invoking, but it's also applies to every single group. Does the American right not demonize their political enemies? Does Donald Trump not demonize his political enemies? Please. Is it not common on the American right to hear people like Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi described as evil communists and killers and threats to all things decent? Are they not compared to some of history's worst monsters? Political discourse is often extremely coarse. It's often extremely aggressive. It's designed to demonize. Every political group does it. And the idea that somehow now we're going to accept this theory that was actually created by leftists on college campuses, that it's a form of scholastic terrorism, that if you speak against a group, you subject that group to violence, and that it's not just the person pulling the trigger, but the person who's expressing views in the name of which the shooter is killing somebody who's responsible. As I said, this was the attempt to criminalize basically the entire MAGA movement, to blame every person on the right for massacres in Buffalo and Charleston and at the El Paso Walmart, all done in the name of the dangers of immigrants, shooting randomly black people or Latinos. Or even just a few weeks ago, when an evangelical pro-life fanatic went and shot 4 people, 2 of whom were prominent Democratic politicians, and according to the FBI, had a list of 45 other names of people in politics he wanted to murder. All of them were Democrats. And it'd be like saying, look, people who go around railing against the evils of abortion inspired this violence. It's an extremely dangerous theory to accept, regardless of where it's coming from, including when it comes from the American right, essentially now trying to say violence isn't just the trigger, people who pull triggers or stab people. Violence are words. The persons responsible for the assassination of Charlie Kirk isn't just the person or people or who pulled the trigger and who organized the assassination. No, we're going to now expand violence to include people who criticize those on the right, have criticized Charlie Kirk. Not only is this an extremely dangerous theory, no matter what political faction you're in, it's one that Charlie Kirk himself, as we're about to show you, vehemently rejected over and over. I mean, it was one of his primary causes. Carrying out censorship in the name of Charlie Kirk would be like arming Hamas in the name of Ben Shapiro. It couldn't be any more antithetical to Charlie Kirk's view what is being done here. And he made that clear over and over and over in every context. Here's the rest of what Trump said.
Must stop right now. My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, law enforcement officials, and everyone else who brings order to our country.
I think he meant who brings disorder. Now, if what he means there is we're going to go after everybody who is paid for other people to go murder people or kill people or to use violence, I would hope the government would be doing that anyway. Those are criminal acts. But if what he means is what's being said among huge numbers of people on the American right, as we showed you last night, that it's not just the violence itself, it's the Democratic Party or the liberal ideology or the left liberal ideology that is responsible for this, and that's what needs to be crushed violently or repressed or imprisoned. That's exactly the kind of theory that will lead to political repression of every kind. I always try telling the left, if you would support censorship, it's going to come back at you. And I can tell people on the right as well, these theories have already led to the attempted criminalization of the populist right in many different countries. Tomorrow we'll cover the verdict that came down today in Brazil from a part of the Supreme Court that was very hostile to former Brazil President Jair Bolsonaro that concluded he was guilty of attempting a coup by a 4-1 vote and sentenced him to 27 years and 3 months in prison, essentially a life sentence in a very serious prison. We've seen that attempt all over the populist West. I've been all over the democratic world against the populist right. I've been covering it continuously. So you can't be heard to complain about it if it's done to you, if you're going to turn around and support the same theories to do against your political opponents. But that's exactly what's happening. Here's a Republican member of Congress, Clay Higgins from Louisiana. And this is what he announced today. Quote, I'm going to use congressional authority and every influence with big tech platforms to mandate immediate ban for life of every post or commenter that belittled the assassination of Charlie Kirk. If they ran their mouth with their smart-ass hatred, celebrating the heinous murder of that beautiful young man who dedicated his whole life to delivering respectful conservative truth into the hearts of liberal enclaves, universities, armed only with a Bible and a microphone and a constitution, those profiles must come down. So I'm going to lean forward in this fight, demanding that big tech have zero tolerance for violent political hate content. The user to be banned from, quote, all platforms forever, in all capital letters. I'm going to go after their business licenses and permitting. Their businesses will be blacklisted aggressively. They should be kicked out from every school, and their driver licenses should be revoked. I'm basically going to cancel with extreme prejudice these sick, evil animals who celebrated Charlie Kirk's assassination. I'm starting that today. That is all. I made very clear last night what my views are of people justifying Charlie Kirk's assassination or celebrating it. I think it's reprehensible. I talked about the danger of society. I talked about the coarsening and corrosive effects on one's own spirit and internal life. But there's no question it's protected by the First Amendment. These statements are not, let's go murder Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's already dead. After the fact, they're saying, I think the killer was justified. I think the world's better off without him. I'm celebrating the fact that he was killed. These are disgusting sentiments, but they're unquestionably protected political speech. I mean, I heard conservatives for the last 6 years vocally complaining, and I joined them in every way, about the dangers of the Biden administration pressuring or coercing big tech to censor dissent from their policies, things they thought were dangerous, like questioning vaccines or questioning masks, or in general, in their view, trying to do things that subject people to violence. What happened to the whole view that that was unconstitutional for the government to coerce big tech to take down ideas that the government finds offensive? When Jimmy Carter died, a lot of people said, I'm glad he's dead. He hated Israel, he was an anti-Semite, whatever. I found that disgusting. But obviously that's protected speech. You're allowed to speak ill of the dead. You're even allowed to say the world's a better place without them. You can condemn it. You can find it morally reprehensible. There's no question it's constitutionally protected. And Charlie Kirk not only would have said that if he were here, but has said it many times. Here's another member of the Republican House, Anna Paulina Luna, a Florida House Republican, who said this, quote, "I've just been notified that Roblox has a game on their platform referencing the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I'm going to be asking Apple and the App Store to remove their app if they don't immediately remove this, as well as contacting the FCC to take down their website." Then she went on, "I have just been notified that Roblox is working immediately to remove content featuring the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Thank you to their CEO for not allowing this nasty and vile content to stay on their platform." One of the things I covered at great length was the attempt after January 6th to destroy the social media site. Parler, right after January 6th, Donald Trump got banned from Twitter and Facebook and Google platforms. They all united to ban Donald Trump. They'd been banning huge numbers of other conservatives. And their argument was exactly this. It was that the views and statements of these people on the right were criminal. They were insurrectionary. They had they had incited an insurrection. They were a danger to democracy. And as a result, Parler, which had been created by libertarians as a free speech platform, much like Rumble was, immediately became the most popular platform, the most popular social media app in the country. It was #1 on Apple stores. And liberal politicians, beginning with AOC, demanded that, exactly what Anna Paulina Luna did here, that Apple remove them from their Apple store and that Google did too, and they immediately complied because the Democratic Party was in power in Congress and they were petrified of their demands. And so they prevented anybody from downloading Parler or getting the updates that were necessary to make it function. And then the day after, once Apple and Google acquiesced, they also demanded that Amazon remove the site from their website, their web hosting services, and Amazon immediately complied. So through government pressure, they destroyed the #1 app in the country because they claimed that it was allowing speech, which was dangerous, that January 6th had been planned there. In reality, there was a lot more planning for January 6th on YouTube and Facebook than there was on Parler. But AOCs of the world are never going to have the courage to try and get Google or Facebook, which funds the Democratic Party, off of Apple. But with Parler, they did. And this is what Anna Paulina Luna is trying to do as well. Based on the same exact theory, we're going to use our government force over Apple and Google to take this site down off the Apple Store if they don't immediately remove the content we dislike. Here's something else she said, the same congresswoman from Florida, who pranced around like a big free speech advocate for many years until the Republicans got into power. Quote, "I am calling on Elon Musk, FinKD, well, I'm not sure what that is, and TikTok US to remove the horrifying videos of Charlie Kirk's murder. He has a family, young children, and no one should be forced to relive this tragedy online. These are not the only graphic videos of horrifying murders circulating. At some point, social media begins to desensitize humanity. We must still value human life. Please take them down." And then she updated her demand by saying, quote, "There has been full cooperation from every company I've contacted so far regarding the enforcement of their social media policies in terms of service on the gross exploitation of Charlie Kirk's assassination, as well as posts inciting violence against other conservative leaders and our president. I want to thank TikTok, Roblox, the FCC, and others who are working to ensure dignity and respect during this time." I will say here that I understand the sentiment. If I were brutally murdered, I wouldn't want my kids to see the video because I'd be concerned about how traumatized they would be. I wouldn't want them, if I got shot in the neck, watching me get shot in the neck and basically die immediately or bleed out and barely make it to the hospital with a pulse. I get that impulse. But I would submit that when a major event like this happens, it's important for us to confront the truth, the hardcore, unvarnished truth of what it really is. I want people who are defending and celebrating Charlie Kirk's death to have to look at what it is exactly that they're cheering. The barbarism and savagery of it. It prevents it from being abstract and presents it in its truthful form. And I absolutely believe that one of the reasons Charlie Kirk's assassination had such major repercussions, not just in the United States, but all over the world, was because of the extremely horrific nature of watching that video. I mean, it's traumatizing to watch. It's horrific. Anybody mentally healthy, again, whatever your views of Charlie Kirk are, can only watch that video in horror. That has to be the natural human reaction. And if there were no video of it, if we just heard about it or read about it, I would strongly suggest it would not have the same effect because it becomes abstract and clinical. I think the same exact thing is true of that horrific, brutal murder of that young Ukrainian refugee who came to the United States as a refugee fleeing the war, who was sitting on the subway, minding her own business, working, I believe, as a waitress to support herself. And a man who has been through the criminal justice system many times, he's black, that became part of the discourse, just for no reason picked up a knife and had no idea who she was, just randomly chose her to stab her in the neck. And it cut her carotid artery, which is probably what happened to Charlie Kirk. And she just slowly bled out and died on the train. And you look at those pictures, you look at the video, and again, you can't help but understand. It's like the savagery of it becomes inescapable. And it has much more of an effect than if you just read in the newspaper that it happened. You'd be able to just go past it. There goes some other tragic murder in a country that has many. And I've talked about this in many other contexts, the importance of actually confronting the things that we're supporting or the things that we're causing. I think one of the reasons why, one of the major propaganda successes of why American wars can go on for so long and people don't march in the street because of them is because we so rarely see the video of our victims. How much video did you see of the carnage we created in Iraq or Afghanistan? How many names of the victims do you know? Or in Libya? Or in Syria? I mean, one of the things that caused so much sympathy for what was happening in Syria was the photograph that captured the small Syrian baby washed up on a shore, highlighting the horrors of the migrant crisis. And the same in the Vietnam War. Obviously, there was no internet then. There wasn't the prevalence of cell phones, but photos of certain massacres became iconic, became very important in the public imagination to understand the horrors of the Vietnam War. These images are very important. And it's the reason, I mean, power centers know that. It's the reason they want to prevent it. It's the reason we don't ever see or rarely see video of the carnage we create in our wars. It's the reason that the war in Gaza has captured so much attention because of all the video we see of it. We see the video of the children being blown up into little pieces or massacred in aid lines or people starving. And it makes it impossible to escape. You're forced to confront it, which I think is a very good thing, as horrific as it is. There were video used of October 7th for that same reason, to make it not clinical and abstract what happened October 7th, but to really show people some of the cruelty that happened there. And there's a reason for it. It helps people understand what they're talking about, what they're seeing, and I think it's absolutely vital, even if it's graphic. There's no way to get rid of these videos. Charlie Kirk's children are small. When they grow up, if they want to see it, they're going to be able to find it, and they should. Obviously, they shouldn't be forced to see it or subjected to it, but it's something that's in the public interest. And it pervades a lot of different societies. I've done a lot of work on the absolutely filthy, repulsive conditions inside factory farms that have replaced family farms, that have made our food supply industrialized rather than organic and naturally grown through family farming. The amount of disease in there, and for me, worst of all, the amount of utter torture of sentient beings, just unspeakable horrors. And the people who own factory farms like Smithfield and JBS understand that if you see images of what's going on inside of it, there will be a lot more people disgusted and horrified by it. It was the images that actually, working with animal rights groups, have snuck inside or got undercover jobs in there and filmed it. That's what made me understand the truth of what was going on in there, much more than just reading studies. And that's why these factory farms use their influence in many state legislatures, where they pour tons of money into the campaign coffers of people, to criminalize getting into these places and filming them, because they understand the importance of videos and images to understanding the truth of what's going on there. It makes it much more difficult to minimize or dismiss. Here's a Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in 2025, that kind of like a information sheet, and I have studied these laws and written about them and reported on them for years. I understand exactly what they are, so I'm not just blindly relying on it. What is ag-gag legislation? Quote, over the past decade, the animal agriculture industry has been behind the introduction of, quote, ag-gag bills in more than half of all state legislatures across the country. These dangerous bills are designed to silence whistleblowers revealing animal abuses on industrial farms. Ag-gag laws currently exist in 6 states, penalizing whistleblowers who investigate the day-to-day activities of industrial farms, including the recording, possession, or distribution of photos, video, and/or audio at the farm. Polls consistently show that the majority of Americans favor humane treatment for animals. A 2012 poll revealed that 71% of American adults support undercover investigative efforts to expose farm animal abuse on industrial farms, and 64% oppose making such investigations illegal. And there have been South Dakota, dominated by these industries, had such a law that criminally prohibits the use of, quote, deception to gain access to or employment at an agricultural facility that is not open to the public, with the intent to cause physical or economic harm or other injury to the agriculture or production facility, meaning you get a job there, and at some point you go undercover, or a group enters a facility without permission and films. The idea is to prevent you from seeing the truth of what's taking place inside, the truth about our wars, the truth about what murder is by people who want to dismiss it. These are crucial instruments for understanding the truth, and it's why so many power centers want to prevent them. And so while it may be well-intentioned to compel big tech platforms to remove the videos of Charlie Kirk's assassination, there were thousands of people there. We're talking about mostly college students. They all have cell phones. They film everything. You're never going to get rid of these videos. And even if I give her the benefit of the doubt and believe it's well-intentioned, there's a huge public service, a journalistic service, to seeing the reality of what that is. Politico in October of 2024 had a headline, "In Gaza, a tipping point for social media at war." Israel, as you know, banned all international journalists from entering Gaza. Sometimes they handpick their favorite ones who are propagandists for the Israeli government. They take them in for 1 second under the protection of the IDF, show them what they want them to see. But real media, independent media, is prevented from going to Gaza because they don't want media reporting on and filming and showing the truth of what Israel has done in Gaza. But as a result, we have plenty of people in Gaza who have cameras, who work for media outlets, have phones, have access to social media, and that has played an absolutely vital role in ensuring that we can see the things that they want to see. Now, I just want to point out, really emphasize what Charlie Kirk thought about all this, not by speculating, but by showing you his own words. And I told you before, I've talked to Charlie Kirk about this. He was very generous in his praise of my work, even though we recognize we have very different views on many things. But the 2 areas where we most bonded was, number 1, my reporting about the abuses and dangers of the deep state, the Snowden reporting on the abuse of the FBI, the CIA, which he vehemently supported. But the other major cause of his life was freedom of speech. And he was a consistent advocate of free speech. There are not very many of them. Here is Charlie Kirk in July. This is 2018. So I'm going to show you some more recent ones. But this one is from 2018, July of 2018. Freedom of speech isn't just being able to say what you want to say. It also means at times hearing ideas you might not want to hear. Here's Charlie Kirk in May of 2024, so about a year ago. Compare what's being done in his name or what's being called for in his name to what he actually believed. Quote, hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech, and all capital letters of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free. So he's saying, look, there is no such thing as hate speech. You can have evil speech, but there's no hate speech except under the First Amendment. All speech, all of it, he said, is free. You cannot constrain it legally under the Constitution, including expressing happiness over someone's death. He was very clear. He said you can find it gross, you can find it evil, or despicable, even dangerous, but ideas and opinions and words cannot be constrained. Those are protected by free speech, said Charlie Kirk. Here's what he said in May of 2025. This was right after that young couple was murdered outside of the Israeli embassy in Washington. And there were all kinds of calls to ban all kinds of views based on the argument that it inspired this violence. And here's what Charlie Kirk said about this. Please listen to this, especially if you're somebody who thinks that you're acting in his name by calling for things that he spent his life opposing. Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky, the couple that was murdered, were two beautiful young people with their whole lives ahead of them. Their murder was senseless, evil, and horrifying. And the man who did it should be punished to the maximum extent possible. But I must push back against one thing. All over X, I see claims that some people have, quote, blood on their hands simply because they made tweets attacking Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli government, or the war in Gaza. In other words, they were trying to say it's not just the shooter responsible, but for the people who inspired him through their expression of their ideology. And to that, Charlie Kirk had one more word. He said, no. And then he just added, I just came back from the UK. Every day there are 30 people are arrested for social media posts that the government says are, quote, dangerous or offensive because they oppose things like mass migration or Islam. In the UK, people are arrested for silently praying or holding signs outside abortion clinics. And I would add they're also arrested for expressing criticism of Israel or support for pro-Palestinian groups. And then he added this, quote, there are people who want that same tyranny here. People who oppose freedom of speech will always claim we need to act to prevent, quote, hate or stop violence. We must always oppose that. But just because an idea is provocative or even offensive does not make it violent. Speech is not violence. Only violence is. Speech is not violence. Only violence is. Anybody calling for the arrest or the censorship of people who either did not pull that trigger or participate directly in the planning of his assassination, you may think you're being very righteous. You may think you're being very benevolent. What you're actually doing is advocating exactly that which Charlie Kirk spent his whole life consistently denouncing and opposing as far more dangerous than the speech itself that you hate or think is dangerous. And he was absolutely consistent about that. As I said, I've talked about that. I was on his show to talk about that and other things. And I actually talked about the demands by the Trump administration and many on the right to censor speech against Israel on the name that it's provoking anti-Semitism, and he was in full agreement. And again, he said that himself over and over. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.